All right, so today we're diving into some Rudolf Steiner, yeah. Specifically his ideas on initiation and the occult, which I know is something that you're interested in exploring a little bit more about, this idea of what lies beyond, the everyday. And his book, The Way of Initiation, is sort of kind of like a guidebook, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think so.
He lays out a path for developing these latent senses. So, beyond our five senses that we're used to working with to try to access deeper knowledge and insight.
Yeah, it's interesting. Steiner, born back in 1861, really offers a different, a stark contrast to how I think a lot of people approach like the occult today.
Okay.
He's not talking about shortcuts or quick manifestations, but really like cultivating specific inner qualities as the foundation for any kind of genuine spiritual development.
Right. And that's what's interesting to me, too, is that this is less about spells and rituals, which, some people are really drawn to that. That's totally fine. But it's more about this inner transformation, which, let's be honest, is way cooler.
It's way cooler.
Yeah.
In the long run, I think so.
In the long run, yeah. So we're going to break this down. We're going to break down his core principles, some practices, even potential pitfalls, because this is a path that, you want to be careful as you're moving through.
Well, and I think a lot of times when people get interested in these topics, which, by the way, they're popular for a reason, right? There's a reason why they kind of capture our attention, but we can get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's where we're here to kind of help break down, make sure that you're not getting too far ahead, that you have a good foundation.
Exactly. And to kick things off, Steiner, he emphasizes three qualities that you might not typically associate with, unlocking occult knowledge or, finding these hidden senses. And that's, devotion, reverence, and respect.
Yeah.
Now, these aren't just feel-good buzzwords that he's just throwing out there.
Right.
He's talking about a deep, active engagement with something greater than yourself.
Yeah, I love how he brings it back to, he uses this analogy of rubbing a glass rod to create static electricity.
Oh.
Right, so you're causing a reaction. It's a law of physics. It is what it is. And he's suggesting that there's a spiritual law that's activated when we're cultivating genuine devotion or reverence or respect. There's actually something that happens within us. And it's not just this woo-woo, vibe you get. It's there's actually something tangible that's happening within your being.
Yeah. So it's by embodying these qualities, we're sort of tuning ourselves. It almost reminds me of you have to calibrate those old radios to tune into a specific station.
Totally, yeah.
100%.
Yeah, we have to sort of adjust our instruments.
Yes.
And part of that is it's not enough to just have an intellectual understanding. Steiner is very clear. We have to cultivate a certain inner posture and a receptivity that allows for a deeper kind of knowing.
It's almost how we were talking about having a map to navigate this physical world. Well, you can read about a landscape, but then actually being in the landscape and perceiving it, feeling this, smelling it, seeing, all of that.
Feeling the energy of the place.
Yes, it's very different. It's a different way of knowing.
Yeah. And that leads us, actually, that's a perfect segue into the next thing, which is this inner stillness that Steiner really emphasizes, and the importance of carving out dedicated time for reflection and contemplation.
Now, when you say carving out time, because, I think about my life, and everyone listening is probably thinking about their own lives, and it's okay, well, how much time are we talking about? Do I have to, quit my job and go live in a cave? What are we talking about here?
Yeah. Thankfully, no.
Okay, good.
Steiner is very clear that even 5 minutes, if it's practiced with focus and intention, it can be really transformative.
5 minutes feels doable.
Totally.
So, but how do we access this inner stillness? What's the actual practice?
Yeah. And it's interesting. One of the things he suggests is to try looking back on your experiences as if they happened to someone else.
Okay, so create a little distance.
A little distance, exactly.
Yeah.
To get out of our own subjective experience and to try to cultivate a more objective observer.
You're watching a movie of your life.
Totally. Yeah.
Instead of being
100%. And what that does is, all of a sudden, all that, emotional baggage, the charge,
Right.
you can actually just see things more clearly.
Right. Because you can see the patterns that are happening.
Totally.
Because when you're in it, you're in it.
Totally. You're just going through it. And it's, it's almost like this weird paradox, because to get this objective view, it requires turning inward.
Right. It's very meta.
It's super meta, totally. And this leads to, I think, like one of his more kind of radical propositions.
Okay.
That our thoughts aren't just these like fleeting abstractions.
Right.
They are actual forces that can shape reality.
So we're not talking about like positive affirmations here.
No.
Okay, so you're saying he actually believed that our thoughts had a real impact
On the world.
on the world. Wow.
Yeah, and that's where I think he starts to diverge from like some of the more maybe popular interpretations of the occult today, where it's a lot about like, manifesting.
Right, like what do I want?
Yeah, manipulating the universe to get what you want.
Yeah.
Whereas Steiner's really like emphasizing this more disciplined and even ethical approach.
Yeah, right.
Because he's saying like what we focus our thoughts on, the quality of our inner world, is actively shaping our experience.
It's not just wishing our problems away. It's this understanding that our thoughts have a potency, right?
Totally.
And that we have a responsibility to really cultivate a more conscious relationship.
Yes.
To how we're thinking and what we're thinking. It's like we're not just observers of reality, we're active participants.
Totally. Yeah. 100%. We're co-creating it.
Yes.
And this, this kind of leads into the heart of Steiner's path, which is he lays out these 3 stages of development.
Okay.
And this is where we get into probation, enlightenment, and initiation.
All right, well, let's take a break and we'll come back and we'll unpack those 3. Okay, so we're talking about this path of inner development, and now we're getting to the stages. We've got probation, enlightenment, initiation. I mean, it sounds a little bit like we're leveling up in a video game.
It kind of does, doesn't it?
But like in real life.
Yeah. Yeah, and it does have that sort of progression, building upon each stage.
So let's start with probation then. What are we doing in this stage?
Well, you can think of it as laying the groundwork. Building those foundational skills of inner perception.
Right.
And Steiner, he describes this practice where you take like an ordinary seed.
Okay.
Something you might just like totally overlook.
Right, just a little tiny.
Totally, yeah, like a grain of rice or something.
Yeah.
And you really observe it.
Okay.
But it's not just about seeing the physical form.
Right.
He's asking us to really like engage our will, engage our imagination, to envision the seed's potential.
So instead of just seeing this like tiny little object, you're trying to connect with the life force within it.
Yes.
The energy that's going to allow it to sprout.
To become something more. And what's interesting is that Steiner suggests that as people start to develop their spiritual perception, they might even begin to see something quite remarkable. And he describes it as this subtle, luminous cloud surrounding the seed.
Whoa, hold on. A luminous cloud.
I know, it sounds crazy, right?
That's wild.
Yeah.
So is this something that, like, if I stare at a seed long enough, am I going to see this? Or is this, like, something that not everyone can just, like, see?
Right. And that's, I think, a really kind question. And Steiner's perspective is that these abilities are latent within all of us.
Okay.
It's not like you're born, with, special spiritual eyesight or something.
Right.
It's something that's cultivated through practice.
Okay.
Just like you go to the gym, you work out your muscles, you get stronger.
Okay. So we can train our spiritual muscles.
Exactly. Okay. So, all right, say we're doing the seed exercise. We're starting to, develop our perception a little bit. What comes next on this path, on this probationary stage?
So the next phase we get into is what he calls enlightenment. And this is where things get even more interesting because we're starting to refine our perception to another level. And here, Steiner suggests this fascinating exercise where he says, like, take a stone, a plant, and an animal. But don't just compare them in terms of their physical characteristics.
Okay. Yeah.
He's saying, like, focus on the distinct feeling each one evokes in you.
It makes me think about how certain places have a certain feeling.
Yes.
You can walk into a room and like feel the energy. Like, is that what he's talking about? Totally. 100%. He's talking about attuning ourselves to those subtle vibrations, those energetic fingerprints that exist beyond our ordinary senses.
So how do we do that? How do we actually start to like attune ourselves Is it just about paying attention?
It is about paying attention, and specifically through this practice of like really feeling into the difference between like holding a stone and then like touching a plant.
Yeah.
And then like, obviously, be careful with it.
Right, don't go petting random animals.
Exactly. But like just sensing those subtle differences.
Yeah.
He suggests we can develop what he calls spiritual eyes, the ability to perceive astral and mental colors.
Hold on. Astral and mental colors.
I know, it sounds crazy.
So we're not talking about the literal colors.
No, not what we see with our physical eyes.
Right.
But again, it's more like these energetic vibrations that we're perceiving with this new sense.
Okay, so because we're using colors, so obviously we have to connect to something. So what kind of, are there like colors that are associated with certain things?
Yeah, and he does offer some like ways to understand it, right?
Okay.
He says like stones, they have more of like a blue or a red quality.
Okay.
Plants resonate with green, which makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And then animals, kind of that red-yellow combination.
So everything has its own little like energetic color in these realms. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're saying that we can learn to perceive this?
Yeah. And what's interesting is Steiner mentions that there are beings in these higher realms that have what he calls like marvelous colors.
Okay.
And some that have what he calls like horrible colors.
Oh, okay. So it's not all just like rainbows and butterflies.
It's not all love and light up in here.
Okay.
Right. It's a whole other world.
It's like we're peeling back the layers of reality, and it's like, whoa.
Totally. Yeah. And it's a vast and complex reality, and it has its own inhabitants and its own forces.
Okay. All right. That's a little spooky, but also kind of exciting at the same time, right?
Totally.
So probation, we're starting to see with these new eyes and enlightenment.
Yeah.
But now what about the third stage? Initiation. What's going on there? What are we being initiated into at that point?
So this is the culmination of the path, but in many ways it's also the most demanding.
Okay.
This is where you're really put to the test.
Oh boy.
And Steiner describes initiation as a process of undergoing these 3 trials, each designed to push us to our limits.
Okay.
And to help us access deeper levels of wisdom and mastery.
Lay it on me. What are the trials?
All right. So the first one, and probably the most well-known, is the trial by fire.
Okay.
And don't worry, we're not talking about like literal flames here.
Okay, good.
Although it can feel pretty intense.
All right.
But it's more about this process of inner purification.
Okay.
A burning away of those illusions and attachments
that
keep us bound to the material world.
So it's like an inner crucible where we're like confronting our fears and limitations and all the things that are holding us back.
Totally. Those aspects of ourselves that are like preventing us from stepping into our full spiritual power.
So, okay, what kind of experiences are we talking about? Like, how does this actually manifest for someone?
It's less about specific practices and more about this fundamental shift in perception. And Steiner suggests that through this trial, we develop a much deeper, more intuitive understanding of everything around us.
Okay.
Objects, plants, animals, even other people.
So it's like the veils are burned away and we can see the true essence of what we're encountering.
Yeah, you start to see the interconnectedness, those deeper patterns, those deeper forces that are at play.
Okay. All right. So we've gone through the fire.
Yeah.
What's the second trial about?
The second trial is mastering the mystery language of the higher worlds.
Okay, this sounds intense.
This is where it gets really interesting because we're talking about a language that goes beyond words, beyond concepts as we understand them.
So not like a spoken language?
No, not at all.
Okay.
It's a language of pure energy, archetypes, spiritual impulses.
Oh, wow. Okay, how do we even begin to like comprehend or understand a language like that?
And this is where all that inner work that we've been talking about, quieting the mind, really becomes essential. Because Steiner believed that as we refine our perceptions, we become more still, we become more receptive to these subtler forms of communication. It's like we're tuning our inner instruments to pick up those higher frequencies.
So this isn't something you can buy a textbook for.
No.
And learn.
You can't just phone this one in.
Okay. So what are we learning? Like what are we receiving when we access this language? What does it do?
You know, the information can take many forms. It could be symbols, images, intuitive insights, even like a deeper understanding of events that are happening around you in the world. And Steiner suggests that this language is really revealing the hidden workings of the universe, the interconnectedness of all things.
Wow. So we're not just receiving information, but we're also learning how to then interpret it and work with it.
100%.
Yeah.
You're learning how to make decisions, how to act, how to live in alignment with this deeper understanding of reality.
It's like we're getting like a secret decoder ring or something.
Totally. Yeah, it's like you're finally you're handed the user's manual to reality.
Okay, I like it. I like it. All right, so we've gone through fire. We've learned this new language.
Yep.
What's the third trial?
The third trial is the trial by air.
Trial by air. So I'm seeing like a theme here. Fire, language, air. It's like we're going through like the elements, right?
It's true.
Okay. So what's the deal with the trial by air?
So if the trial by fire was about purification, and the second trial was more about like communication and understanding these higher realms, this trial is about action and integration. It's really putting it all together.
Okay. How are we tested during this?
Steiner describes it as this test of self-mastery.
Okay.
Where we're challenged to act solely from our inner guidance, detached from external pressures or even our own preconceived ideas.
Wow, that sounds incredibly difficult in a world.
It's not easy.
That's constantly telling us what to do and how to think.
Exactly. And that's the test, right? Is like, can you tune out all that noise?
Right.
And really trust that inner compass, that intuition that you've been cultivating.
It takes a lot of courage, I would imagine.
It does. It takes a tremendous amount of courage, of faith in yourself, of really trusting that connection to something deeper.
It's like even if my logical mind is telling me one thing, but I'm getting this other message, like
you got to go with that.
Trust that.
Trust that. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So Steiner he's not like, this is not a walk in the park, clearly. This is a very rigorous...
No, it's not for the faint of heart.
This is real self-transformation.
Yes, absolutely. And this is where his emphasis on discernment becomes so important.
Okay.
Because as we're navigating these higher realms, it's very easy to get swept up.
Right, exactly.
In fantasy, in delusion.
It's like, how do I know what's real and what's, just my imagination?
Exactly. And Steiner's very clear. He's like, you have to develop that discernment. He actually compares this idea of orientation in the higher worlds to navigating the physical world.
Okay.
You wouldn't just wander off into like uncharted territory without a map, without a compass.
Exactly. Yeah, you need some tools.
You need some tools and you need the skills to be able to navigate right.
Okay, so we're not throwing away logic and critical thinking.
No, we're refining.
We're using it, but in a different way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're upgrading, basically, your mental operating system.
I like it. Okay, so we're developing our discernment.
Yeah.
We're being very careful. Is there anything else that we can be doing as we're moving through these trials?
Yeah. One of the things that Steiner really emphasizes, and he actually gives a great example in the text, he talks about how a disciplined approach to listening, even to viewpoints that we might not agree with, can be so valuable.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because so often, it's very easy to get caught in our own little echo chambers.
Yeah, confirmation bias.
Totally. And Steiner's reminding us that true understanding often comes from engaging with those perspectives that challenge our own.
So it's not about like just blindly agreeing with everything you hear, but really being open, like really listening and trying to understand where someone's coming from.
100%.
Yeah.
And it's about recognizing that everyone's on their own journey.
Right.
And that within those different viewpoints, there might be these little nuggets of wisdom that can really help us.
It's like we're expanding our own inner landscape.
Yes.
By allowing for more diversity of thought.
100%. You become more like a fertile garden rather than like, a monoculture that's like prone to disease.
Right. Exactly. This reminds me of that idea of inner encouragement that Steiner talks about, which is such a cool idea.
It's so important.
That the knowledge and the wisdom doesn't just come from out there.
Yes.
But it emerges from within.
100%. And it comes back to cultivating those inner qualities, right?
Yes.
Devotion, reverence, stillness,
discernment,
all of that. Those are the the soil
Yes.
from which this deeper understanding can emerge.
It's like the difference between reading a recipe
Yeah.
and actually cooking the meal.
Totally, 100%.
You know, you can read it, but until you actually do it,
You don't really know it.
you don't really know it. And to that point, Steiner uses this really interesting metaphor
Okay.
of two drafts, right?
Yes.
The draft of forgetfulness
Yes.
and the draft of remembrance.
It's powerful imagery.
Yeah, so what do these drafts represent?
So these drafts, again, not literal drinks, but these symbolic experiences that mark like this turning point
Right.
on the path of initiation and the draft of forgetfulness. This is about letting go of our attachment to the lower self,
Okay.
to the ego, with all of its limitations, its self-centered desires.
So not literally forgetting everything we know.
No.
Okay.
But it's more about releasing the grip, right? Releasing the grip of the ego, that need
Right.
to cling to those limited perspectives, to our fears, to our preconceived notions.
So it's almost like we're emptying the cup, right?
Exactly, yeah. Emptying the cup so it can be filled with
Yeah.
something new.
So if the draft of forgetfulness is about letting go, what is the draft of remembrance about?
The draft of remembrance is about the awakening to our true nature. So it's about remembering those higher truths
Okay.
that have always been present, but have been kind of obscured by our identification with the ego, with the material world.
So it's like we clear away the clutter, and
Yeah.
then we can see
Totally, yeah.
what's underneath it all.
And with that comes this incredible sense of purpose, this deeper understanding of our place in the grand scheme of things.
It sounds like this whole process of initiation is about stripping away what no longer serves us, and then remembering, reclaiming
100%.
who we really are, our potential.
It's about coming home to yourself.
I love that. And you know what? I think that's a beautiful place for us to wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah, I think so too. It's a lot to digest, for sure.
It's a lot to digest. If you're listening to this and you want to continue the exploration,
Which I highly recommend.
yeah, check out Steiner's work,
Yeah.
The Way of Initiation. And remember, be patient with yourself.
Be patient.
Be courageous, bring your discernment along with you. And who knows, maybe you'll discover those hidden senses within yourself.
Yeah, they're there waiting to be awakened.
Until next time.